Welcoming back to Chamber Amplified. You might be the leader in the clubhouse in Chamber Amplified appearances. Tricia Valasek with Raise the Bar, Hancock County. Tricia, thanks for joining us again.
Well, thank you for inviting me again.
Absolutely. Well, it's a good time of the year to check in. When this podcast posts, will be in August, which means kids are going back to school right around the corner, which means you have a lot going on in getting those kids some real world experience or letting them see what real world experience can be like. So I thought we'd kick off there. What are some of the things coming up for Raise the Bar this year?
Yeah, thank you for giving me this chance to share. We're really excited because every year we keep adding more events and we're making sure that students in every single one of our school districts in Hancock County are having access to these workforce development conversations and career exposure moments. And so I guess we'll start off with, we'll have 5 career expos. These are for high school students, tend to be 10th through 12th grade. Each school district gets to choose 3 to 5 students to come with them for that day. We tour different workplaces, and those are centered around different career clusters. And we look at where the students are as a whole for our community, and then we pick out which clusters we feel like we need to expose them to careers to see, I could do this. This is a fit for me. I've got the aptitude. That's what my assessment's telling me. Now what do I do with it? So we're excited to do those. We have one for September, October, November, February, and March. And again, those students are handpicked by the school districts, but they're using their YouScience data to pick the students that have maybe the ability, like the mind wiring to do those types of careers, but maybe they aren't interested because they've never seen it before. Also coming up on the first Friday of October, we do our annual Career Connections Day. That is where every 8th grader in Hancock County comes out to Owens Community College at the Findlay campus. They have an hour to basically speed date, if you will, the different employers that we have. We're currently getting those employers lined up for indoor and outdoor spots. And the students have to go around, ask them general questions about what they like about their job, what don't they like about their job, fill out a worksheet, get some cool swag, and then they have to talk about it with their teachers when they get back to school. And we also have a mock interview day that'll happen once again in May. So we need 100 professionals in our community. Could be retiree, could be a current person who's employed, but we need about 100 people to interview students, and that's been growing, and the students are doing amazing at these interviews. But it's a nice chance for them to kind of lower their anxiety levels about, like, what do I talk about in a scholarship interview? What if I've never had a job interview? And we're just continuing to add as we need to, as we see the opportunity, because we want to make sure as many kids as possible have the chances to learn what they're good at, find that there's opportunity right here, and to get exposure to it.
You mentioned YouScience. I want to go back to that. You probably saw me like, aha, the light bulb went on, because we've been talking about YouScience over the years, but I think people kind of forget what it is and that it's available to their business and how it can help connect them to future workforce. So let's do a refresher on what YouScience is and how area employers can get plugged into it.
Perfect. YouScience is a brain game type of test. Every student before they graduate from Hancock County will have taken this assessment at some point. Most of them are doing it in 9th grade. Sometimes we're playing catch up, depending if they've moved into the district. But regardless, by the time they graduate, they should have this assessment. It's a couple hours. It's about 8 brain games. It's measuring everything from how good you are with patterns to numerical, like doing calculations really fast, to how big your vocabulary is. There's no good answers. It's just truly what your brain is good at. And then it pairs it with what your interests are, and it gives you a report about yourself. And that leads us to know how to guide people in the right direction. And businesses can take advantage of it by putting their profiles. They can create a free business profile in YouScience. And what's awesome about that is when a student lands on, let's say, their type of business that they would be a good fit for, anyone can see that business's profile. Hancock County is not the only place using YouScience. It is prolifically used throughout the state of Ohio and even outside of Ohio. If an employer has their profile in there, they will show up when that search radius, geographic boundary, is set to whatever we would fall into. If you're not in there, you don't exist to the or to the students. And so it's really important
Right.
to fill out that quick profile.
Well, the thing I like about it, and what we've always been told about it, is that people might hear it and think, "Oh, another test of
Mhm.
personality test. What do you like? What do you don't like?" And that's a small part of it, but it's the aptitude part, because what they have found is kids' aptitudes once they reach high school, what you're good at doesn't really change. You're good at what you're good at, and
Mhm.
it's good to know what that is, because you're probably going to be happier at a job that you're when you're
Mhm.
good at it.
Yeah, how many times have we been in a job where it just feels really good to be able to show off your strengths and to have a person graduate high school and feel like confident that they could say, you know what, I am really good at this, and here's how I can use that skill in the workplace. That's just really empowering, and it's you got to mix that aptitude assessment. You got to take YouScience and pair it with a personality test or what their work values are. There's a lot of different assessments to pair together to maybe give them the best insight possible to who they are and what they work best with.
So you've been running Raise the Bar for a while now, and what's great when you've been with an organization year after year after year is you can start to see where you're getting gains and maybe where you want to focus efforts, things like that. Where have you seen the most gains over the last few years?
One of those would be with the teachers. Schools are always faced with having to add more content into the day, but not necessarily have the opportunity to learn that content outside of their subject area. Math teachers know math, science teachers are great at science, but now they have to start building in these career conversations. And if you've never been anything but a teacher or your
Mhm.
spouse is something, then you probably don't know a lot about those other jobs. Allowing Raise the Bar to create opportunities for professional development days where maybe a single school district is taking their teachers for the day. We're doing that for Van Luz schools. We've done it for Liberty Benton and Arlington. But also when they have a county-wide professional development day, we can give them those types of opportunities to see the workplaces, learn a little bit more, and be completely blown away by all that our community has to offer. So that's been a huge, tremendous gain. And we've also been partnering a lot more with higher ed throughout Northwest Ohio. There are a lot of great higher ed places that students can take
Mhm.
certificate classes, they can get a degree. We're trying to connect them back to our community because if they aren't from here, they might not know about our businesses and all that we have to offer. So we're making good strides with that team as well, just to raise all awareness and get us all moving in the same direction for the betterment of Northwest Ohio.
Speaking of higher ed, you and I have had this conversation a few times. Is that the discussion when it comes to what to do after high school? Should it be higher ed? Should you go directly to the workforce? A lot of times when you're on social media, which is just the greatest place to have a conversation, but a lot of times you see it framed as an either or. It's everybody should just go to the workforce. College is not worth it, or everybody should go to college. Workforce isn't going to get where you need to be. And I know you and I have talked about it, like that's not the right way to frame it. It's a yes, and there's room for everything. And it's great to hear that the workforce organization is also talking with higher ed in the community, because we need it's the mix that it gets so polarized online when you hear people talk about it. I think you and I both agree it's the mix that really is what really leads to success when it comes to workforce.
And I think the best thought process is after high school, you're not done learning. There's
Yeah.
a lot of different ways to learn. And sometimes it's going to take a degree, and sometimes it could be as quick as a certificate. But careers change so fast, especially with the introduction of technology, that you always have to be willing to learn something new. And going out into the real world with that expectation that I have to be willing to learn something new all the time. And however I get that information, it doesn't matter. That lifelong learner aspect to me will be the most valuable thing I can have.
One of the things that is great about Raise the Bar is you're able to be that connector between where the work is being done and where that future workforce is coming from. So when you talk to area businesses, whether it's manufacturers, small businesses, what have you, what are the things they're telling you that they need to see in the workforce going forward? Has it changed much over the years?
No, honestly, I think over the 6 years that I've been doing this, it always comes back to what are considered the durable, soft employability skills. And they're just taking on new shapes and forms. Critical thinking, productivity, professionalism, communication, those have not ceased in any way to be the most important skill sets. It's just when we talk critical thinking and maybe with technology, it's how am I asking the right question to know I'm getting the right answer back, especially when you might be using an AI or chat, Claude, whatever. And so it's how do we teach those soft employability skills, but in this new framework of how we actually do work. And I don't see that changing at all. And it's something that we're just going to have to be very diligent about making sure that we're teaching it and honing it, whether you're still in K-12 or you're into higher education or even in the workplace. We still have to think about honing those skills.
I think that's a really interesting conversation because you could look at it. We still need to get these kids the soft skills, and we do. And probably the argument is made that like back in the day, kids had soft skills coming out of college or high school. But did they? I mean, you can go back and read newspaper editorials for an entire century from each decade that the young people in the workplace just don't want to work and they don't know how to work. And it's just every decade we think that the latest generation doesn't know how to do it. You actually are interacting with these kids, and I would have to imagine that's not your experience. That they're actually curious. They actually want to learn to work. It's just they're wired a little differently than those of us who grew up in the greatest decade to grow up in the 90s was.
The 1900s, as my kids tell me.
No, don't say it that way.
As if we're, Civil War era here. But yeah, they do. They have a different way of going about obtaining their information because they have known nothing other than, for Gen Z, like accessing it online. They've never had a world where they had to use a touch tone dial phone or, use the rotary phone and understand how to dial numbers. They just don't get it. And that's okay. And we have to really be appreciative that sometimes them doing it a different way is actually maybe going to be a better way.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And just knowing that their experience is just so wildly different than how we were as kids and how we learned as kids is, I think, half the battle there. When you talk about those generational experiences with area employers, how do they respond to that?
It's a give or take. I mean, they understand there's always limitations. There's no chicken or the egg. How are you going to actually tackle the root causes of some of these, what we consider discrepancies in how we want people to be in the workplace? So no one has a silver bullet. If we did, there wouldn't be any workforce issues to tackle. And sometimes it's just having those conversations so those aha moments can happen for everyone. Even employers like, I didn't realize that's why when I get a young student, why they do it this way. Yes, we all have to remind ourselves that the times are different. Even I have to remind myself, I'm sure you do too, but there's just different ways of learning and we have to roll with it.
No way, I'm young and hip. I'm always up to date with what's going on. So
my bad.
So I always like to jump around, but you talked about the connection with area colleges and the higher education. I know one of the areas of focus is to be getting interns that are here for the summer involved too. And you actually just had a program about that here within the last week or so. If you can tell us a little bit about what that is and how that also helps connect them to the community.
Absolutely. Interns, students that are coming to our region. If I pulled the numbers on how many individuals are enrolled at Northwest Ohio higher ed institutions, I mean, we're talking in the tens of thousands every single year. And this is a workforce that tends to come into our community, but then maybe never stay. They leave. They don't have that connection. What we decided to do here in July was to host a summer intern luncheon, and we invited any intern from Hancock County area employers to come from the lunch. We had 24 employer represented. We had students from 18 different universities across Ohio. We had some from Indiana, Michigan, and Texas. We had students who went to those institutions, but they were from other states than those. And, they showed up and they saw their classmates' names on the list. And they go, I didn't even know they were here in Findlay all summer. And so it gave them a chance to catch up. It also gave them a chance to meet someone new that they maybe go to school with, but they've never had a class with them, especially like big institutions like Ohio State or Cincinnati. They might be in completely different programs, so they never had the chance to meet. And then they were talking a little bit about what they liked about their internships and talking about the employers they got to work for. And the idea was to allow them to realize there's a lot of other places I could maybe work, and maybe they'll come back for their next internship, or they'll consider coming back to Findlay just for their first time job. We really wanted to welcome them to the community, make them feel like this could be their future home, but also just to connect with each other, because they're going to need each other, and those network connections are so important in the workforce. So we're looking to do this every single semester when we have interns in the community, which means our next one, we're probably looking at a late November, early December luncheon for those students.
We'll close on this. You touched on it a little bit. You said the interns they could talk about what they liked about the internship, but also what they didn't like about the internship. And a lot of times when we talk about workforce development and career development, things like that, we focus on like, hey, do what you like. But we also are teaching kids, here's something that you thought you might like, but you didn't. And how important is that to the process and learning the things that you don't actually like doing?
I think we heard a little bit of that at the tables. And when the students were talking, that sometimes they just realized that a particular part of their job wasn't what they expected it to be. You can learn about it in the classroom, but when you actually see it out in the real world, it's a little bit of I don't find that as fun, or I didn't realize it's exactly what I'd be doing all day. The employers that have brought their interns into big meetings where they're meeting with everyone, they're part of the brainstorming team, they are learning about all aspects of the workplace, those interns just raved and raved about how great their experiences were. And I think overall, although you might hear kids say, I didn't really expect it to be like that, they all enjoyed being here in Findlay and with their employers. And they were all saying, I would come back, or, hey, you should come here next time. And it just builds a great sense of positivity that our community undoubtedly deserves.
That's great to hear. If people are interested in learning more about Raise the Bar, maybe you want to get their business involved with Raise the Bar, what's the best way to do that?
The best way is to go to our newly launched website. Ooh. We still are at raisethebarhancock.org, but we have had a complete revitalization of the website. We are fulfilling part of our mission, which is to connect stakeholders for workforce excellence through that website, because it has different pathways depending on who you are accessing it. There's a whole part of that website designated for you as an employer. You can learn all of the different ways in which to get connected with the workforce, especially starting from what we call cradle to career. We also include a lot of resources, programs that employers can take advantage of to maybe help pay for some of these employee development costs. And then there's also a whole part on there for the students, the career seekers, to use to learn about themselves, go through the process of the career finding journey in a theoretical foundation. But they will land on information specific to Hancock County, which shows some of our employers' local data, setting expectations for the careers that are here and projected to be growing over the next 5 years. So, we really say get connected to our website, because we are pointing all Hancock County middle schoolers to this website as they go through their new middle school career connections class starting this fall. And it's also just something that we're heavily promoting among community agencies with their job seekers, higher ed for their students. So if you want to get connected and you want to be featured on that website, then let me know and take advantage of that.
All good things here. Tricia, thank you for taking part again. I think the only person who's been on Chamber Amplified more than you is me. Always appreciate the update from Raise the Bar. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Doug.